got a lot of work to do. I'm Michaela Wilkes, and I'm running as who I am for who we are.
Since Michaela Wilkes' taste of her criminal justice platform in Maryland's 5th District. So yeah, that pretty much should prove to you there is a lot of good people out there running and pushing hard for all the right stuff. And one of them could be in, I don't know, maybe the presidential race sometime soon. So that's something we should definitely keep in mind. Yeah, Bernie Sanders, he's done us a great service. He's replaceable, though, and he will be replaced. The people who are in power now will not be in power forever. There's always change. It's when it happens. Right now, they are strong. There's no way around this. They're stronger than the populist movement that Bernie Sanders invigorated in 2016. They're stronger than the movement he continued this cycle. But what they also are is afraid because their power is waning. Young people in this election supported Bernie Sanders over any of his challengers by astounding margins. In New Hampshire, there was a girl who was too young to vote, but successfully persuaded both of her parents to go to the polls and vote for Sanders. I did in New York. Came a little bit too late, but unfortunately it happens. Yeah. When asked why the girl who's persuaded her parents liked Bernie Sanders, she said nothing about him as a person, instead launched directly into a detailed rundown of his platform. Free public universities, student debt relief, aggressive action on climate change. Young people like old-ass Bernie Sanders as a candidate for sure, but where many of them connect is what he represents and how he can improve their lives. Just his basic honesty and the knowledge within him that he will fight to whatever means necessary to make your life better the best he can. And you can tell that he really cares, and he cares about all the right stuff. So, yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things here. I think at this time, I think if you want to take a moment and just think about like your time with Bernie Sanders, your memories with Bernie Sanders, it is well within your right to do so. Because you probably, I know I did, we had good times, we had good moments, and we were very close, barring a completely unprecedented series of events, to winning the Democratic nomination. So there is that. But, I mean, looking forward to is also important. Bernie Sanders is not the only one who can make those arguments. He's not the only one who shares those views. He was a remarkably honest, by all appearances, fundamentally decent person. With the campaign to elect him was always more about the better society he could help us create. There still is a path to get there. What we cannot do now is give in to despair. Electoral politics is a tool to create change, but there are many others. Labor organizing, direct action, community involvement, and opportunities to use these tools are everywhere. We can use these tools. You can support your local union, you can support your local organizing group, and maybe just cast a vote for Joe Biden if you live in a swing state. Like, that is a perfect way to feel good about yourself and also put in a lot of work for causes you actually care about. Because trust me, if you're listening to the show, Joe Biden's 2020 campaign is probably not one of them. It is tempting with this in mind to give up on the ballot box, especially when electoral politics are reduced to a cynical question of harm reduction and choosing the lesser evil between two despicable options. But these small differences in degrees of evil matter to people on the margins. We should not have to choose a lesser evil. We should never have to settle. But if taking a box on a piece of paper in a swing state can potentially make it so slightly fewer human beings die of the thirst on the Sonoran Desert, then it's probably worth a shot. The Supreme Court still wields immense power over the future of our country, and let's be honest, RBG isn't getting any younger. And yes, many of the Never Biden people are saying she should have retired during Obama's term. Absolutely, she should have, and she should be held accountable for her decision to not retire. I think in a big way by the left, and what she's like, her selfishness, her need for the spotlight and to stay in well past her age, and with the assumption that, oh yeah, Hillary Clinton's going to win for sure. It's totally fine. Hillary Clinton's going to win. Like, her need to just continue to wear those black robes well past, like, sane levels is ridiculous. But yeah, these two paths, you don't have to pick a path of supporting Joe Biden or going off into the wilderness. These paths are not mutually exclusive. You can fill out a ballot for Joe Biden and throw a brick through a bank window on the same day. I'm not necessarily saying you should, but it is certainly possible. Metaphorically parodying the game, it is certainly possible. And if electoral politics reduces even a small amount of harm in 2021, then direct action has that much less ground to make up, which is a good point. Like, you can really help. And Joe Biden most likely will be easier to protest. He will be easier to at least force to put in good fill your cabinet in well. Like, I mean, you have a better shot with him than you do with Donald Trump. Bernie Sanders and many of the good people who work for him will understand this. It's almost certain he will endorse Biden, and likely that he'll do far more than the bare minimum to help him get elected. But I'm certain his campaign and supporters will also continue the work that they've been doing for years, organizing on the ground, knocking on doors, contributing direct aid, and helping people use their own voices on a national platform. This work will inspire successors. AOC and hundreds of thousands of others got into politics while organizing on Sanders' last campaign. And when another candidate comes along who shares our views, we'll be ready to support them, criticize them, and push them to be better. There will be other changes to make, and there'll be plenty to fight for in the meantime. As Bernie Sanders says, let us go forward together. The struggle continues. So, good stuff there. Reporting there from Jack Crosby. Yeah, pretty cool stuff. So we move on now here. As Bernie Sanders, if you didn't know, he famously announced his first run for president literally on his lunch break. He ended his second and presumably his last. He literally, it was in 2015, he found a grassy spot outside the Capitol to hold a 10-minute news conference about his priorities for the country's challenge to Hillary Rodham Clinton for the 2016 nomination. Yeah, if you look at the 2015 New York Times transcript, and you could just tell, looking back on the New York Times transcript, the reporter's like, wow, he's talking about Iraq so much. Oh my gosh. Income inequality, he's talking about that as well. He's talking about healthcare. Oh, this is crazy. Yeah, it is really quite transparent. And that's the way Bernie Sanders has always been, transparent. So, yeah, he ended his second and presumably last run for president with 100,000 people watching on a live stream on his website, with many millions of people more desperate about what his exit means for their future and the future in general. In the 5 years between those moments, Bernie Sanders became one of the de facto leaders of a party he's never really been an official member of. He's certainly the most popular person in that party today, as he's used his new platform to drive the Democratic Party leftward and paved the way for a small but influential new class of progressives to be elected in 2018, while empowering the left wing of Congress that already existed to challenge the Democratic establishment in a historically entrenched and immovable object. Medicare for All is no longer a pipe dream, but something that's been supported by the majority of the Democratic electorate in every state that had a primary. But for all the gains Sanders made, he still lost. He lost the Clinton machine in 2016, and in 2020, the establishment pretty much kneecapped him, and forcing the nervous Democratic voters to fully get in line behind a Biden campaign that had no money nor organizing presence in the Super Tuesday states. He lost despite the fact that Biden never had anything approaching a good debate performance, and that Biden found himself outshined by a rotating cast of centrist candidates up until Jim Clyburn endorsed him and won South Carolina by a larger than expected margin. That's just the truth of the matter there. It's difficult to reconcile these two things, and so a lot of people on the left appear to be defaulting between one of the two conclusions. This idealistic view that we lost the battle but will win the war, and the revolutionary view that electoralism is good and dead. Both sides do have a point there. The success of a 78-year-old socialist in winning over key parts of the Obama coalition, young people in 2016, 2020, and Latino voters this year, proves there's real appetite for a type of democratic socialism. It doesn't necessarily have to be phrased as socialism. I don't think those labels are very important. It's about the policies, it's about the vision, and whatever name that comes down under is really irrelevant. Even in good economic times, there's an attitude for quote unquote good economic times. There's an attitude for real change here. Given that the economy had to crash through the floor in order for us to get the reforms of the New Deal, it's not a bad place to start. At least get some people on that train at least a little bit. But what we do see was him, at least in the end of his run, starting to win over people who he had not previously won over. And that was something that was kind of hard to ignore until all the wind was kind of sucked out from under him. At the same time, there's never going to be another Bernie Sanders, not exactly anyway. What helped doom him in the Democratic Party was what endeared him to so many people in the first place. He's a living embodiment of the anger towards the bipartisan consensus that produced only war and economic ruin for the working class. And what's more is that he was successful. He was a mayor, then a congressman, then a senator, and he nearly won the Democratic nomination twice while running on explicitly on the legacy that the most popular Democrat in America was not enough, and that we needed to go further than the most popular Democrat in America. So what happens now is up to Sanders and the movement that is formed around him. If the lesson the left takes from the setback is that you can never be the machine, so either throw all of your efforts into non-electoral organizing or just buy a gun and wait for the revolution, our political future is bound to be defined by a rotating cast of increasingly militaristic and ecologically concerned fascists and feckless 2000s-era technocratic liberals, both of whom will be hostile to left-wing unions, if not unions in general, and other organizing efforts. So the lessons to double down electoralism on anything above the school board level. The reality is you're committing to a long-term effort to fundamentally change the Democratic Party into something more liberal. After Bernie, there are no more independents, so there's a very little appetite for a quote-unquote Labor Party among these sort of high-profile political figures. You need to get an effort like that off the ground. There might be a change if Joe Biden loses in November, and a combination of 2 losses to Donald Trump in the coronavirus factions in the Democratic Party for good. But even getting on the ballot in many states is probably going to be an obstacle. But it is unclear where the left should go or will go, and you should be wary of anyone who's remotely confident about what's next. Like, it's really kind of hard to tell what could be next, because it's like you just don't know. There's no way of knowing what comes next. We're literally in the middle of a global pandemic. We don't know what the future will hold. So with that in mind, I think it's kind of important to take a look at kind of the past and what we saw from here. And I'm pretty much to give my take on it and kind of just cathartically say, like, what Bernie Sanders did right and what Bernie Sanders did wrong. I mean, I think he was running, there's no denying he was running a campaign that was fit to win the nomination and in place to win the nomination. But I think really where he went wrong was, I mean, there was a case you can really make about he didn't build his coalition enough after Super Tuesday. But what he did is not respond to the Monday before Super Tuesday, where all the candidates dropped out except for Elizabeth Warren, and she stayed in, and she kind of sucked all the air out, or a lot of the air out of Bernie Sanders' performance in Super Tuesday states. So it is a pretty important dynamic there, and he didn't know how to respond to it. And it's a tough thing to respond to. It really is. But I mean, that consolidation of power, it was always possible. It was definitely always possible. And Bernie Sanders' campaign, I mean, even if he had come out of that consolidation of power, that if he had really pushed harder and going negative on Joe Biden, things would have been different. I don't know. But I think the biggest thing is, A, not responding to that consolidation of power, and B, not going harder against Joe Biden when it was clear it was a one-on-one race, I think are two of the biggest flaws in his campaign. But other than that, I mean, those are really the two things that I take away. Those are the two things that I take away more than anything. I'm sure there will be more time for analysis and more time for figuring some of these things out, but those are the big, bold, highlighted points to me. So, yeah. And that is kind of just an analysis of what's going on. And really what I see, I'm sure people are going to have different, really different kind of takes on this, but it is what it is, I guess. But yeah, I'm sure there's going to be a lot more movement, a lot more pushing to find a new way. And really, we got to take a look at what's going on right now and the November election. And for those of you who are wondering, Joe Biden, whether you should vote for him or not, yeah, vote for him if you're in a swing state. But if you're not, I mean, vote your conscience. It's the same thing with Hillary Clinton. I think it's totally fair to vote your conscience if you're not in a swing state where you could vote for anybody you want, but the state's still going to go one way. Like in New York, if I were voting right now, I probably wouldn't vote for Joe Biden. He doesn't care about my views. He doesn't respect the left wing of the party at all. Why would I vote for him? Why? Tell me one good reason why I would vote for him where my vote doesn't matter. Like, I mean, I think you do kind of owe it to, and I have gone back and forth on this, but now I really kind of see the point in at least